Okay, hello everybody. We have a very exciting thing to start the book club today. Today is, let's just say it is June 9th, 2015, and we're going to be going over chapters 5 and 6 of the Autism book. And as a special treat to start us off today, GAYLE is going to read something that Lyrica typed and wanted to share. So go ahead, GAYLE.
Good morning, everyone. We're so excited about this book club. You can hear Lyrica in the background just being just as excited as I am. But this morning she was real inspired to write something to share with the club. So this is what she wrote. You can hear her laughing in the background. The thrust of the NVAs, and that's nonverbal autistics, is landing on the earth plane now. Watery flow is no longer under an interference patterning. The truth is, everyone now is under a great intensity setup. The degree to which one can pick up the NVA channel of influence is related to many factors and having a direct connection to us. This can be via a personal relationship with a high heart resonance, or tuning into a book or blog written by one of us, or tuning into the collective via meditation. Meanwhile, we are organizing more under a new beginning that promises to support a direct interface opportunity that we are currently lighting up. It is our Pyramid program that assists with the transference of non-physical energy and consciousness into a form more accessible in the physical plane. The Sedona meditations have been holding the space for this transference process to become a more physical experience for all. More to develop here before we can share this. And I'll just add that Lyrica really wanted to bring this in, even though it's really premature in terms of being able to include a whole lot of others in the experience, because we're still developing it. Particularly Lyrica, Avery, and Daniel, who are here together, and families are going through the initiation process of trying to wiggle into the mystery and help develop its flow and its power and its possibilities. And so if anyone's interested in staying tuned, staying with this process, just go ahead and go to the Autism website and sign up for the newsletter. And this was Lyrica's idea this morning, because she's actually putting the book club into an interface with this new pyramid, and it's going to intensify the experience, or it can intensify the experience for all those who are participating. So this is part of the grand development and experiment, and thank you all for being a part of this. And I'm going to give it back to Connie, and we'll tune in with joy. Bye-bye.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, GAYLE, for sharing that, and thank you, Lyrica. And we so appreciate being blessed with your sounds as well. I know that they're meaningful, and I always love hearing from both of you, so that was really special. So yeah, I mean, GAYLE pretty much let you know, you go to the Autism website, and I'm going to impress upon those two to go to the website and read some of the past blogs that are there, because there's a lot that's been said over the years, even since about 2011 when the book was published. And so there will be a lot of rich information there to gain from as well that's written after the book. And we're going to touch a little bit on the meditations and tonings, which kind of are discussed in these chapters. And those can also be found on the website. So www.AWEtizm.com. Great. So that was a really fun, quick little impromptu that we weren't expecting. It came in last minute, just perfect timing. And I just wanted to start us off today with a couple of things that also came through before that I wanted to share. So last episode, we discussed, I mentioned actually a young girl, Sarah. She's 9 years old, and she's also nonverbal, and she's been typing with her mother, Meredith. And their blog website is loveisallyounneednow.wordpress.com. And so I asked Sarah if she wanted to share anything for the book club, because I just felt really, really drawn that she might have something to say. And just so you know a little bit about Sarah, she's telepathic, she sees angels, and she communicates with them and does work with them. And that's just a few of her many gifts. And what Sarah had to say is kindness, giving. Love makes New Earth learning planet again. Hurting us with fear, try using love instead. Understand autism is gearing world for its very other use, which now is lower planet. It will be a place of surprising growth soon ready. Its use will be to work souls to be one with God. Be at one with the Creator, and you will find true peace. Have peace in dealing with those in autism. Yes, we are a challenge, but world needs hard lesson. Not a punishment, but a help to find our way. Love all begins. Love all beings, and world can change. And I thought that was lovely. And you can find that actually on their blog. She also was inspired to post that on their recent blog. Yeah, so I'm a little thrown off a bit. Connie, welcome, and welcome everybody that's here. Thanks for being with us today. If you haven't seen any of our previous shows, there's a link to the previous show down below the description of this YouTube video when it's posted on my YouTube channel. And you can find all of them there on the channel as well. Please share, and you can sign up also to receive emails and updates, because there's a little bit more information as far as beyond the recordings. Connie, is there anything that you wanted to share to start us off today from your end?
Oh, hello. It's great to be here today, and what a treat to hear the...
Bring the camera down a little
Hi.
bit so we can see more of your beautiful...
Oh, hi. It's great to be here again and to talk about the book club. It's such a treat to hear Lyrica and Sarah's words at the very beginning of this. Thank you so much for that.
All right, well, let's just dive right in. I wanted to clarify something just in case anybody's confused, because there's been a lot of time that's happened between when this book was written and now, where we are with, kind of what Lyrica was talking about with even, just the pyramid and that sort of thing. That's stuff that's really cutting edge and leading edge, and that's happening right now. But there's a delineation a little bit between the nonverbals who are sharing, those that wrote in the book, and those who are coexisting right now with Lyrica, with what Connie so lovingly calls the Trinity. And so the co-authors that wrote in this book were very key components to, I know GAYLE's ability to pretty much just be the facilitator and the channel for this information in which everything came through. She sat down with each of them and typed on that letterboard. I believe that's what they used. They didn't type it out themselves. This is all written through facilitated communication paired with this kind of shorthand telepathy that I got to observe when I met them. It's an amazing thing to watch, because it's inspiring, and it just kind of shows you what's possible. And so Leslie, Kellen, and Sarah, I believe, shared a living facility. They lived in the same facility that Lyrica did back in Tennessee. And so when GAYLE would go visit often, she would meet with them. And those were the ones that really kind of tugged her heart and opened it up and pulled her back to that purpose of what she's been doing now with autism. So Leslie, Kellen, and Sarah, such blessed souls and such beautiful words that they share to come through, in addition to Lyrica's. And Connie and I were discussing this before we got on, that we're probably going to be needing to slow down a little bit with the amount of chapters that we work with at a time, just depending on how many pages they are, because the information is so rich. And as you can tell by listening to a little bit like what Sarah had to say, It's very similar to the way the words came through for Lyrica and Leslie and Kellen and Sarah back in the day. So you really have to kind of read through it slowly. And I'm going to suggest that when you do read, start as early as you can before the book club begins, because then it gives you time to go back over it. But also open yourself up to a space where you open your heart and you allow the words to pass through you, because we're getting into some deep information that the rational mind will argue with. I mean, I don't know how many of you have experienced, you know, listening to channels and different things like that, but I've had many experiences where I can't even hear what they're saying because my rational mind is arguing with whether or not this is true coming through. And so if we can set aside all of our judgments and allow ourselves to be open and to receive the message, and it's not about the words specifically, it's the frequency and the codes and keys that are within them. Something that the collective consciousness of the children has said to those in awesomeism, that, you know, it will meet you in the space in between. And so it's that gap, it's that space between the words, it's that silence. That's the space where we receive this rich data and frequency of love that opens us up to the greater gifts that are not only within what this message is, but within ourselves. Is there anything you'd like to share about that, Connie? I'm sure that you have your experiences with that as well.
Yes, actually, going back to the facilitated communication and what that GAYLE received that information from them. Well, there is, how do I say, when you said the fighting with that information, there was a part where Lyrica even wrote, I am used to my words in FC not being believed. And I believe one of the reasons is because it is so rich, and another reason is because they're using a facilitator. There is a light touch that is involved, and a lot of people will say, well, how do I know that it's not you that is doing the typing? Okay, so what I wanted to get into is how Lyrica says, or she explains why we need a facilitator is because the autistics, they have the antenna, and the facilitators are the earth grounding. And that if the channel, the facilitator is poor, they will not ground into that poor channel. And the reason for that is because they are literally getting higher information. They're taking higher information and they're trying to get, if you can imagine this, they're taking the higher information and bringing it down to us in this reality. And so with that, there needs to be a strong channel for that, a strong facilitator. If we have a facilitator that is, you know, not, that they can tell, you can't hide it from the autistics that's fighting with the information, you may not receive any information, or the information may be choppy. And I've actually, personally myself, experienced that with Daniel when last year it seemed like I was able to get more information from him because, you know why? Because my mind was like a child. I was like a little kid in the candy store having a good time with him and more open. And then when I started becoming hard on myself, expecting more out of the facilitated communication and telepathy, because it does work hand in hand. You know, there'll be times where I'm facilitating with Daniel and I can actually hear, and other parents will hear, and caretakers would experience this as well, you can actually hear the word before it's typed. Okay, so now that I'm, you know, I'm a little harder on myself, that information does not come in as smoothly as it did last year. But it does come in, but it's like I'm having to work on myself to bring it in more, because right now I consider myself a poor channel. And not to beat myself up, but that's what it is. I'm a poor channel right now.
I can completely understand that. Thank you for your sharing that vulnerability, because that's kind of what we experience in this process. There's a lot of waves that come through, and kind of what Lyrica had touched on in what she had to share today, how there's just some major shifting going on right now. I know this last couple weeks in my own life have been incredible with the amount of who I am not coming up to the surface for me to be able to release it. And I think that's the hardest for all of us, because we're so used to our patterns and our habits and the way that we know ourselves. You know, we know ourselves through a lot of untruths. And it's not that they were something that were wrong that were picked up. I believe that we as a soul chose those for a purpose, just like these individuals chose their bodies and their experiences. And I can totally relate to what you were saying, Connie, about how you got excited and there was this part of you that, you know, is just wanting more and more. And as I read through their words, it's exciting to really be able to tap into that part of not just who we all are, but within ourselves, because that has not really been something that's been encouraged or validated, but it's everything. It means everything. Beyond anything that we've made important is what I'm finding. So I'm kind of going with something that I forget to do. I set out to do it, and then I get involved with my life, and then I get reminded, I get pulled back in. And I think that just like telepathy, you know, we're receiving those messages from our children and from our guides and from our angels and from the creator, you know. What's the direction that our soul really wants us to go, because it is for our highest good. You know, we look at things accomplish wise as, you know, money, career, you know, the American dream, if you're in America, you know, all of these things where it's to accomplish these physical means. And it's not that those things aren't valuable and necessary and needed, but they come along with all of that when we really turn that focus inward and achieve it that way. And I'm still, just like everybody else, we're all still learning about how that happens. I wanted to share something on page 60, and it relates completely to what you're talking about, Connie, because this facilitator piece is not only important to us receiving this clear information from those who don't have a physical voice, but it has so much to do with where we're going with co-creating this new earth together. So Lyrica writes, the facilitator is the ground wire. The higher beings are the language holders and teachers. So FC is not a tool for communication. Watch it here. It is a tool to soar above the earth plane in a grounded way. It allows us to not lose our connection to the infinite when we speak our thoughts and communicate them to another. Facilitators are best when they hold a higher vibration. Grounding to the heart of Mother Gaia is not an easy tie to make. We will not type on our grounding through a poor channel. We have to sense a safe place to touch our holy truth telling. And then she goes on to talk a little bit about, we must not want to write asking just for ourselves. Asking for self things is disconnecting from the oneness. In this world, we're taught to ask for things we want. We are asked for choices in our day. We have little regard for most of these choices. We have soul asking for soul wanting, which is so different. And how I interpreted that is exactly what I was talking about. You know, what she's saying here is it's not important what we want to eat and when we need to go to the bathroom. Even those things are important, you know, but how long does it take to really think about or do those things? And how many of those things can we do without thinking about it? Think about those of us who are fully embodied and we use those functions every day. Do we spend much time on that? No, not really. And if we are, we're kind of spinning our wheels in a space of ignorance. There's not really anything that's happening there. And so I love what she said. We have soul asking for soul wanting, which is so different. That really touched me deeply because I struggle with that too. You know, Lyric even says it. There are wants of the ego, and there are wants of the spirit. And those wants, I think, ultimately do not necessarily reap a different result, but they have a deeper connection with who we really are, and it gets us there quicker so that we can get on and experience this greater aspect of life and kind of why we're really here, you know.
And Amy, and one of the things that I loved how Lyrica said, watch it here, because she wanted to make it a point. Now, be careful, because this is not about, okay, won't you go take a bath? Do you want to go take a bath? Do you want to go, where do you want to go eat? You know, this is a tool to soar above the earth plane. And I noticed with Daniel even, now don't get it wrong, Daniel will sometimes say, hey, can I, you know, ask for things on the board? Very rarely. But he does seem a little irritated if you're asking him for something that is a want. You know, he'd rather talk about the science, the spiritual stuff, and he's not, you know, I want this, I want that. So that makes sense to me, you know, when I reread that part. Oh, okay, that's why he seems a little irritated. He's not, you know, even if I ask him, hey, are you in pain? He's like, who cares? He doesn't want to, you know, he wants to talk about different things. That's the spiritual aspect of it.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a telling of the times that we're in, because it's like I said, you know, all the things that we make matter. And one of my favorite quotes is, what you make matter really becomes matter. And we are expanding in our consciousness as a collective humanity. I mean, there are people that don't even realize it. And it comes to it from a place of, you know, maybe just recognizing what we're putting in our mouth, you know? So those things are important, you know, don't get me wrong. I'm not negating any of those daily functions. But if you think about it, you know, I'm a mother of two. I have a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I'm actually getting ready to have another one in 6 months or so. And this very short period of time between birth to, you know, 5 or 6 years old, there's a lot of hands-on, there's a lot of all of this of what we're talking about. Where do you want to go? You know, just caring for the body. And it's a very, very important thing, because these are our vehicles. These are our vehicles that we've chosen to experience this earth with. So very important to learn and have those skills. But sometimes we place so much importance on that. It's kind of like being in this time that I am in my life. It's easy to feel like, oh, it's just always going to be like this. But how many people do you talk to? And Connie, you can relate to this. You know, it goes so fast. And, you know, my 8-year-old, I was telling my husband the other day, he's almost 9. And if he decides to move out of the house at 18 years old, we've essentially already had him for half of his life, that close to us. So it's such a short-lived period of time, and taking care of those things, although they are important. I believe our children today, this is kind of my connection with the new children, is what I call them, you know, just kind of the children of this new millennium. And Lyrica touches on that. I will seek out and find that in my notes. But I remember reading that for the first time, because that was my passion. That was kind of my path that I was really learning a lot about, because I had these kids that were, or actually a son that was energetically sensitive. You know, he's the one that led me to autism, because he had these kind of quirky things that were going on. And he's very close to being on the spectrum when all of that kind of comes to the boxes that you check. And so it was something that was what I realized, the doctor long ago realized for Lyrica, is she's not going to learn the way that we normally teach these kids. And she even touches on that some more. It's on page 61. She says, we not go to school to learn stuff like others. When we need to know something, it's given to us. We do not have to learn things. We simply have to see a purpose that is soul compatible, and the knowing comes through from another source. That is fifth dimensional living in a changing world. And I can attest to that for sure, because I know in my own growth and ascension and the experiences I've had and with my personal evolution, is there are times where you do have access to this information. So you're clearly tapping into this other vibration, this higher frequency, that all of this information already exists. So how amazing to cut out the Common Core and to, you know, not go through all of these traditional ways of educating. I think that's why unschooling and things like that, homeschooling, are so prevalent now, is because they're showing right here what that doctor picked up on by just looking at Lyrica's eyes when she was a baby. It's incredible what capacity is within them there. What's your experience been with Daniel as far as him just coming up with information, or, you know, you thinking that he doesn't know this, he was never taught that, but yet he did?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to bring that part up about we don't have schooling, because as I mentioned before, Daniel really was kind of tossed into the corner. It was not a good education system. So for him to have access to that knowledge, I mean, the book actually helped me understand how he was able to have access to that higher knowledge without being educated. You know, it's because, like Lyrica said, we don't need schools. When we need to say something, we get it from high up. We get the information to say what we need to say, is what she said. And yeah, so they don't need schools. And going back to what happened in the autism experience about a few weeks ago with a gentleman from Peru, and his aunt was like, well, he didn't really have that great of education. I wonder if he knows how to read. And I said, of course he does, because how can I say he can't? Because if Daniel knows how to read, he told me, I know how to read. I'm quicker than you, Mom. So and if he knows, they don't need, we may need this, you know, information, you know, until we open up to tapping into that higher knowledge, but they already have access to that information. So thank you for touching on that.
Absolutely. You know, it's available to all of us. And that's what I'm going to just keep reiterating that through this entire club, because that is the biggest part of this message. Is it's kind of like what Jesus said, you know, what I can do, you can do, and better. And so they're here to help. Yes, they're the messenger, just like Jesus was the messenger. They're the message, you know, put above us. They're to say, hey, this is what is happening, this is what's possible. And, you know, tapping into this amazing capacity, and all of this moves beyond the physical body. You know, it's important because the physical body is our vehicle. It's the way that we express through and experience and have senses. But physicalness is such a very tiny, tiny, tiny piece of the all that is. So, you know, we're just beginning to learn on that, because as human beings, you know, some of us don't even believe that the earth is even that old, you know, so there's a lot of belief systems and things like that that need to be broken through so that we can all collectively move there together, which we will. I think we're all doing it on our individual paths, but we still are connected. And I believe it's in that place where we can access that sort of information that we need when we want it. And I want to point out, Lyrica said, I notice what she does actually in a lot of her stuff is she asks questions. And that's something I want to bring up, because it's kind of like if you're wanting help from your angels, or if you want help from God, what do? You pray, you ask. And that whole adage, you know, asking it is given, is really true. So it's the same thing with this wisdom and these questions. Is I noticed that she asks questions, and with those questions come the information and the answer. And, you know, she says here, we are teaching again the fifth dimensional ways of being. We've come here in a fifth dimensional energy body, asking the world to rise up into its higher dimensional density. That's why we don't fit into this third dimensional world. Information on dimensions, is there anything from your experiences that you want to share, or insight on dimensions?
Do I want to share anything about dimensions? I'm sorry, it cut off.
Yeah, yes, that's what I was asking. Have you had any, experiences to where you can describe what you understand dimensions to be?
Oh my goodness. Well, the best way I can describe dimensions is in 2011, I would wait up late at night after my husband meditated just to hear about the different dimensions that he'd go to. And he would meet different beings in these dimensions, and he'd have this little notebook, and he'd write down their name and how the dimension looked and all that. So that is my only experience with dimension is way back in 2011. Now, Daniel also speaks of other dimensions in his writings. One of them, I don't know if it's a planet called Amalusa. He talks about that. But I've never really, me personally, have never experienced other dimensions, but I've been around two people in my life, my husband and my son, who are, they're in other dimensions or they experience other dimensions frequently.
That's really neat. I think that we're just embarking upon really understanding that. And so thank you for sharing that. And really, you are experiencing them through them, and I'm sure it's giving you some reference points, because that's something that I've noticed. The more that my consciousness expands and the experiences that I have, I play a little bit with some alchemy, and there is no reference point to where that goes. We have reference points mainly in the third dimension, and the way I understand dimensions is they're levels of consciousness. And so the third dimension is what the mass consciousness has been functioning on for a very long time. And it's where all the right and wrong, good and bad, should and shouldn't, all of this rigidity lives. But when you expand, you hear a lot about that in spiritual circles and conversations these days, is this fifth dimension. And that's why I asked, I'm just curious what you've experienced, because I think it's coming into our consciousness. Go ahead.
Well, Amy, you know what? I just had a memory. I did have another dimensional experience twice. One of them involving, and that was last year. That was a very profound experience, and I just didn't equate it to a dimension, but it had to, because it just felt different. And another time is actually when I was in meditation with the nonverbal autistics. I was in my stillness place, and I opened my eyes real quick, and in front of me were two Asian little girls, and they were holding hands, and I actually forgot where I was for a second. I just kind of looked around like, what happened? And then it switched back to my living room, and I didn't understand why that happened, who were the girls, but ironically, my mom came to visit about 2 months later, and she starts talking about, and here I am thinking my mother is kind of, old school religion, she doesn't believe in all this stuff, and she goes, nonchalantly tells me, I believe in reincarnation, because I have had several visions and experiences where I was an Asian, and we were being bombed, and I was looking for my little brother. And I wondered, I wonder if that experience, what I saw, had anything to do with that.
Wow. And why wouldn't it? A lot of times things like that happen in the same time frame, not far from the incidents happening, where she talked to you and you had the vision. It's really neat if you pay attention. That's really all it is. It's really paying attention to the things that almost are a little weird or don't seem normal. Those are the ones that are there to get your attention and kind of awaken that part in you.
Thanks for bringing that up, because in one of Daniel's bilocation experiences, that is the message that he had for me. We were actually out eating, and he came, and we could all feel his energy. He was supposed to be at the day half, but he was safe. Remember, folks out there, the autistics can be in more than one place at one time. Okay, So he was at the restaurant with us, and he told me, hey, I need you to start paying attention to all the signs. There is no such thing as a sign that you should not pay attention to, because they're all meaningful signs, and they will open you up. The more you start paying attention to the signs, the more you will open up to your guides, to spirit, to everything you need to be able to communicate, well, not just with me, but with others.
Awesome. I love how that just flows. So I'm really glad that you touched on the bilocation, because that was a question I had. Did I ask you that question prior to the show?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any more you want to share about that?
Oh my gosh.
It's discussed in here about. Let me just kind of preface it a little bit. So in the book, I think it's Kellen, I believe it was Kellen or Leslie, was talking about how they were able to bilocate, or co-locate was another word they used, and that GAYLE was an anchor for them. So that's when they started doing these toning meditations, and they were called in etherically to participate in the toning meditations. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those are in a few minutes. But that was their way of saying, like, they didn't even know that they could do that. So go ahead and share a little more about what you know about that.
Well, like I said, I first found out that he was able to do this, late in 2013, when a former coworker of mine started having visitations with him. And I knew this was happening because she would tell me certain things that nobody else would know, and sometimes he would have certain messages for me. For example, one of those messages was in his own little cute way, although I didn't know what he was doing back then. He told her to tell me to buy a bag of the Hershey's chocolate miniatures and to throw them out on the table, and he was going to look at one of the chocolates like that's the one he wanted, but my job was to figure out which one he really wanted. So I'm thinking to myself, why are we doing this? It wasn't until this year that I realized, oh my gosh, he's trying to work on my telepathy. So a lot of his co-locating, bilocating things were all, they seem to be lessons for me. That's why he was using her to get to me, because I'm so thick-headed, that I'm not going to be able to understand. If he were to come to me at that time, I wasn't going to be able to accept it. So he used someone else, that was able to accept that and give me the messages. But, going back to the time that he went in the restaurant with us, one of the interesting things that happened was all of us, there were 4 of us that were there. All of us were very tired after that. And I don't know if that had anything to do with Daniel co-locating there or using his energy. I don't know, but we were dog tired. We barely could, because we were still at work. It was our lunch break, and we did not even want to go back to work because we were like, we couldn't keep our eyes open. So it is a very real thing when like I said, I'm not sure if there's a lot of energy used, but it's a very real thing. And Daniel has so many co-locating stories. I could just write a book about it. And one of the most interesting ones was when she told me that he actually came to her and took her to a hospital that was outside of the state to go to a 5-year-old little girl who had been in a car accident, and she had head and back injuries, and he took her there to heal the little girl because the little girl called out to him. Amazing.
Wow, amazing. I'm sure you have so many stories like that. What a blessing.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of parents, caretakers out there, that their children or the young adults, they're doing just like Daniel's doing, and they have no idea the gifts that they have, or don't believe in the gifts that they have. So hopefully that would change.
Yes, I agree. And you know what? I think you and I were talking about this the other day because, we're experiencing this major shifting going on right now, right? And so there is no one way for it. I think it's the other way around sometimes too. I've talked to parents that have children that they recognize that their children have these gifts, but their kids won't talk to them about it. And I think that really reflects on that inner experience. And of course, I always reflect back to awesomeism, and awesomeism has been such an important part of my life. That's actually how I met GAYLE, was through Susie Miller, and it's grown and lots of different things have happened. But the main thing about awesomeism is it's about tapping into your own awesomeism. That's, my child led me to it because, oh, here's my child. He's not labeled as something specifically. He has awesomeism. That's really what's going on. It's his awesomeism that's trying to show him through. But then after a while, what I learned with what the work is that we do is we align with ourselves. And that's what GAYLE did so beautifully here, to become even such a clear for these messages. It was about being connected with the self and shedding all of the true self, the inner aspects that there's a multitude of. There's all these different aspects of ourselves that we're learning about, that's kind of goes beyond the physical. And the cool thing that I found was her comment when she discovered that she's actually on the spectrum herself. So that was a huge moment for me the first moment I read that, because it's not something that she talks about, openly. She does in the book, obviously. And something about that really, it came through. We actually had a participant who asked a question about that, about, maybe what the role is for those who are not on the severe end, and how are they supporting those that are on the severe end of the spectrum, which is considered to be, or they call it the low end, the nonverbal. The low functioning are those with less physical functions. And then those that are high functioning are those essentially with Asperger's. And there's many, many individuals who have gone their entire life and not known that they had Asperger's. One of a good friend of mine, she diagnosed herself as an adult because all of the physical issues that she was having, the doctors couldn't tell her what was going on with herself. And she clearly tapped into that deeper part of herself to understand that. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh yeah, it's on page 66. And I love what she says here, because I actually have never had any of my children, medically or through teachers or anything, diagnosed or tested. I did kind of some self-diagnosis at one point because I felt like I was missing something in our journey together to understanding my child better. And I can now really fully embrace and understand what she's saying. She says she was supported by the diagnosis. And one of the reasons I didn't have my kids diagnosed was because I didn't want a doctor to tell me all the things, essentially what they tell people. They just happened a lot of times, not all, but I think a lot. They feed you this line of fear, and your child's never going to be this, and all of these, you're never going to have this normalcy. But the amazing stuff that they haven't tapped into yet is what incredible state of awe you can be in, and the lessons you can learn from your children. They have so much to say, especially, how much wisdom comes from those little tiny people, and they call them old souls, but I think they're tapping into that same dimension or dimensions.
Yeah, it's like they say it, a child shall lead them, And actually, with my experience, I'm glad you touched on that. It is internal, with working on yourself, because now that I think back on it, in 2011, when the oil was created, that was to wake me up, to wake, my husband up to who we are, and to work on ourselves, not to fix the autistic or anything like that. That's so I was open now to a new reality because of it. I cannot deny the new reality that I was awakened to since 2011 and going forward. We're not done yet. Not done yet. And you know what? Well, I totally forgot to do this because you had asked me about Daniel's, if he had anything to say about the facilitated communication. And I would like to read what he said about his experience with FC. And he says, sometimes the stream is too high for us to easily type. So telepathy is the highest way for us to share our gifts. Sometimes FC is difficult for me because my higher knowing is so far away I can hardly bring it down to type. So telepathy is my preferred method to stream my energy. All this to the mom that's still trying to tap. I got some work to do, but it's all good.
Well, it's a long road, I think, and I like actually what he said about it takes a lot of his energy. I mean, that makes sense because you were talking about how those of you at the restaurant felt drained, you were exhausted. And I think it does take a lot of energy to bring, all of that light into, relaying it into words, because words are so small compared to the vastness of our being and the vastness of information that we can tap into, and our bodies can only handle so much, and that's why they're in a lower body. They're in a body that they're not able to fully integrate into, and it's easier for them, and it's probably feels a lot better. I mean, I know in just reading the words of when they describe what it's like to be where they are and have tapped into most of the time, it takes a lot of energy to kind of channel it and bring it all down into the earth. And that's why they need the facilitator, and a clear facilitator, someone who's kind of opened up to that. And I would bet that GAYLE could probably confirm this for us, but when she talks about this, after she found her diagnosis, she realized like her whole life opened up suddenly in a totally different way. She looked at all of it and said, wow, now I understand why I was the way I was and the way I am. And I love what she says here. She says, the more accomplished I became in this disguise, the more I lost connection to my true self. She talks about that on the surface, she'd mastered masking her fears, pretending all was well, and that goes with trying to fit in and keeping up and, trying to do what people tell you should do and is successful and, all of these things that kind of are very surface. But it wasn't until she really connected with herself and is an example of that in this story that it shows that. And I think that's what you're describing, Connie. It's like you got a lot of work to do, and it's beautiful to hear you say that. It's inspiring also because I think what it shows is for many people, you can see it as an example that, it's not about reaching a certain level, but it's about really opening up to what you have inside of you to be able to receive those sort of things. It's kind of like when Meredith was sharing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just giving you an amen choir. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like what Meredith shared. It's like she opened her heart, and that's when Sarah started to come through with the words. She let go of all of the I've got to fix my child. I've got to make sure she's doing this or that therapy or, whatever it was. I don't know what she did, but, we each go through that where we're given a diagnosis and we're told, okay, you need to go do this and this and this. And I've seen a lot of people develop things that have helped children that are on the spectrum, help them speak. I actually just saw this woman created this really interesting software. And I think it's fascinating, but it's really unique to the person. There is still a percentage of people that it doesn't work for, because these children are in our lives for really special reasons that are unique to ourselves. And I think you can totally attest to that.
I love how Lyrica wrote. She said that having an autistic child is the highest initiation that a family could have. That was so beautiful.
I love that too. I do. And I agree with her, you know, because a lot of people that I have met that have children in autism, they're sensitive themselves, you know, and there was one point where I've heard this a few times. It's like you couldn't house that child in your body if you didn't have that frequency that could hold that high frequency child. And I think even if a child comes to you through adoption, there's still that path, that connection. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical connection.
Yes, thanks for saying that, because that's why I say parents, caretakers, whatever, because it doesn't have to be the parent. And like Daniel said to me before, hey, we orchestrated things before we came here. You know, everyone in our life is supposed to be in our life. So, you know, it's something to think about.
I muted myself. Definitely, definitely. I love that you touched on that, because this parent-child caretaker relationship is such a big one. And especially in these times where we're raising our consciousness, and these generations have a hold on us, you know. They're like a leap, they're like a quantum leap in consciousness, ability. You know, I want to go back really quick. We're talking about this tapping into and not having to learn. If anybody's interested, this just kind of ties into a little bit about what we're talking about. But there, I believe it's a school in Japan. I don't know what it's called, but if you look up quantum reading, there is this most fascinating, there's a little video, and it shows these little Japanese children, and they are fanning the book. They're kind of fanning the book like this, and they're telling the teacher what is in the book. And one of the students even was, it was a book about food. He could smell the food, he could taste the food, and he was saying what was in the book. And he was getting it by like meiosis or something, you know, he was just picking it up. It's this quantum field that connects us all. So I thought that was fascinating, you know, and these kids are just part of that newer generation. So there's a lot of proof of what I'm talking about. And even Lyrica touches on it. So I love the science and the spirituality coming together. It's really starting to marry. And I've heard that one day they won't be able to deny each other anymore, even though science proves spirituality. It's really interesting how that works. There was a part that I noticed here. Let's see if I can find it, because, you know, it's interesting how many of us are kind of bound by the beliefs of religion, not really a specific religion, but the religion and the way that it's confined us. And it keeps us from believing certain things. Oh, here I wrote, religion has confused us all. Because Lyrica's, you know, there's a lot of mention of God in the book. And she says, we are here to serve God, not ourselves. And I know for myself, I'd love to hear your take on this as well. You know, my image of God was different. It's grown and changed over the years, because when I was a child, I was told what certain Bible verses meant. You know, I was never given this free experience to say, what does that mean to you? What is that parable saying to you? It was always telling me who God was, this outer, you know, man that wasn't inside of me. And, you know, I grew up with a Christian-based religion, and, you know, that Jesus was here to save me. And it's a really disempowering way to understand. I may offend people by saying this, but this has just been my experience. So, you know, I honor whatever anybody believes, but in the more that I've stepped away from it and had my own opinion, or not my opinion, but what I'm receiving that means for me, I would hear the same phrases that I was read to or taught as a child. And as an adult with a more open mind and heart, I could hear the message in a more clearer way. And what I think what Lyrica is alluding to very much in this is that creator within. You know, we all are a piece of God. And so the God within is what she's talking about. You know, she's not talking about this great being that is overpowering and judging us and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I grew up with. I just personally grew up with this view of this being that was judging me, and it never felt very good. So I would quietly disagree and, you know, move forward. But everything that I read in her words is making so much more sense, because we wonder why we don't get what we want in our life. But often it's because we're not aligned with that God within, which still is going to give us all that we want in our life. But I think our desires change a little bit, or at least change the direction on how we get to them by being aligned with that part of ourselves. What do you think about that?
Oh, kudos. Beautifully stated. And, you know, I was raised Baptist. And, you know, I discussed this before. Everything is the devil. That is different. And since 2011, my experience has been, now I am closer to God than I have ever been. And you are absolutely correct. It is the God spark within us that we're tapping into. When I had the experience, you know, my little godly experience in my kitchen, some people will dispute that and say, nah, that didn't happen to you. It did, because I'm a very logical person. It did. And one of the first things, and it's probably because of my background, how I was raised, but one of the first things I did when I saw this being was I bowed down to him. And you know, I just want to make something clear. There were no words spoken during this interaction. It was the coolest thing. It was all like telepathy, and even from me, you know. And when I went to go bow down, I heard there's no need for that. You know, you don't have to bow down. So, but what we're taught is, oh, you have to bow down, you have to do this, you have to think this way. And like I said, I'm closer to God, and I feel like at times I'm learning what I haven't been taught as a kid. Like what I was taught growing up was how do I say this? Something was missing. It's not the full story, okay? And I always knew it deep inside. And there were times where I was a kid, I questioned, and I get in trouble. Woo, just have faith, don't you? That's a sin to even question. So it's kind of funny when I think about it. So I was like, okay, and you know, it goes back to that you're told what to think, but not how to think. Now I'm going into that, what else can I learn about you, God? Oh, you know, I feel so close to you. I don't feel like, you know, I'm beneath you. Not to say I'm above God, but it's a smoother relationship. One that now it makes sense to me. This is what I've been looking for, even if I didn't know I was looking for it. But it found me. This is how my life is with God now, and it's a beautiful thing.
I appreciate how you were saying, you know, I'm not above God and that sort of thing, because that's a good example of three-dimensional thinking, three-dimensional understanding things, that there is a better and a lesser than. You know, it's even with the dimensions, I think that they're given numbers for sake of just differentiation, but they don't necessarily mean that they're higher, more advanced either. I mean, that's been my experiences. They just have different purposes. It's kind of like light. Light is this incredible word, you know, that is all encompassing for a lot of things, you know. Light creates energy, and there are different facets of light, and there's different forms and non-forms of light. It's really fascinating. So, you know, understanding God in this multi-dimensional way really helps open up your heart, I believe. And we receive those messages. And I like how you brought up the questions. Don't even question. That's a big one, because what did we touch on before? And how many times have you found that when you actually ask the question, how much you receive from asking the question? it's this incredible dynamic that comes through when you are open. You ask the question with that amazing curiosity. That's kind of like why the children lead us, is through their curiosity. That's something that I learn from my kids all the time, and I get back to it and get back to it. And it's easier and easier the more you practice it, to just be in curiosity, and I catch myself, telling them sometimes when I should be asking them, or I should be asking quietly, I wonder why they're doing that. And I know that some of the kids, when there are those revelations, I've heard stories of the child is spinning or flapping or banging their head on the wall, and the parent quietly gets in that space and says, I wonder why they're doing that, or feeling it, just watching them, observing, no words, just feeling into what they're doing, and the answer comes to them. And that's that telepathy, that's that bilocation. I think they're all intertwined, and we're just beginning to understand in perhaps our 3D capacity, not even.
It's interesting you said that, because last night Daniel was having a little difficult time, and my husband tapped into him, and he said, what's wrong with him? He has such high information, and we're being very resistant right now to this information that he's wanting to give to us. And do you know, Amy, as soon as my husband said that, Daniel calmed down and gave us a big smile. So, I know some skeptics would say, oh, come on, that's probably, he's just doing in his own little world, and that had nothing to do with it. But come on, if you pay attention, you open your eyes, you'll see, hey, this is something huge, and he is aware of what's being said, and he appreciates that someone actually tapped in and figure it out. Oh, okay, this is why you're, having these issues. Now, going back to that, I'm glad you mentioned the flapping too, because chapter 6, autism teachers, I wanted to read something from there, and I'll tell you why in a second. But it says, unique qualities and gifts of autism. Living in a world is hard for a person tall in their energy place. Since low energy flows to high energy, we hold open warfare against the lower vibrations in the world. When we are not grounded in our own vibrations of truth, we can get hit by lower vibrations and get stuck there. And she said that sometimes they get stuck so much that they think that they're confused into thinking that's actually their role, and it's not. And she says flapping, rocking, and spinning helps us ground back into our being. Sometimes we even hit ourselves or others to stop the lower vibrations from harming us. Now, that was so important to me when I read that, because Daniel is, sometimes he bangs his head, sometimes he'll come hit me, and I'm thinking, why are you, I'm your mother, are you crazy? Now, after reading that, I understand what he's going through and what the others are going through. And on that note, I want to say to the parents and caretakers, people watching, be aware, especially in this moment, and of any increase of behaviors stemming, because there's some energies going on right now. So, and I'm hearing a lot of that going around, that there's a lot of behaviors and stemming from the autistic collective. So, and changing eating habits. Pay attention to that. Did they go vegetarian? Are they going vegan? Were they vegetarian? Now they're eating meat. Are they being picky? Just pay attention to that.
Thanks for touching on that. You actually, that's exactly what I wanted to bring up. And I thought about that a lot, because you and I discussed that a little bit prior, the other day, actually. And there is something, when the energy, I feel like it's always in flux, sometimes more intense than others. And something that a lot of us maybe don't know is, the sun has a lot to do with the sun activity. So solar flares really affect all of us, because that frequency hits the planet, and it's actually helping raise the frequency of the planet, but it also is lifting up all of kind of the density and the junk that we're talking about, you know, and I feel like that's a time that we're in. That's why I mentioned it earlier in the show. So pay attention to it, but allow it to be what it is. Sometimes when we see our children in discomfort, or we think they're in discomfort, you know, they're flapping or they're doing these extreme things, that perhaps they're just using that to process the energy. And maybe that's the time to tap in and say, you know, what could be something that could support my child right now? You know, it's like rescue remedy or something like that. You know, there are some natural things out there that maybe they need, and maybe they don't. You know, maybe they need a big smack on the back. It's fun that you mentioned that, because I had heard a story about a young man who was doing that to people at school. He would walk up to them and smack them really hard on the back, and he was getting in trouble for doing what he was doing, but he was trying to help people. And I believe Kellen actually talks about that. He actually, I think it's here. It's on page 77. He said he gets so mad to see Earth. Oh, what? Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, Amy.
Oh,
go ahead. I was just going to say what you're about to say, but go ahead.
Okay, well, you can say it if you want. Go ahead, touch on it.
No, I was just going to say that I believe he was talking about he gets so mad at how the energies of Mother Earth are, or how it's being treated, and sometimes he reaches for the throat chakra of someone to try to stop it, but he realizes, hey, maybe that's not the best thing to do, but I don't mean any harm, but I'm just trying to stop that energy, that energy. I didn't write it down, but I remember him saying that. So
yeah, that's what I was going to read. So on page 77, he says he's talking about that he must guard the earth grid with teaching and not by hurting others. And then in the next paragraph, he says, I get so mad to see the earth so hurt that I grab a person's throat chakra to silence their thoughts. Now I understand how my motive was good, but my ways were so earth damaging. So, you know, as a being on earth, a human being, it was damaging to choke somebody. But in the energetic way that he was seeing it, he had high intentions because he could see the energy that was going on. I love how they're really breaking into this, and we didn't touch on this, but I did ask you in regards to the colors. So the chakras are kind of like a rainbow of colors, and we were talking about the facilitated communication letter board. And the green and the yellow was a very important choice, because the green is the color of the heart chakra, and the yellow was the color of the solar plexus, which is the power center. And you said even Daniel had chosen specifically the way he wanted it. I think it was originally how Lyrica had first chosen it, which was a green background and a yellow letters. And then eventually she switched, because she said it had something to do with her sharing her voice. And so that's why the yellow was more dominant, I believe, was because that power was having to come through at that point. So really interesting how even color is so important, and I know sound is, as far as creating things. But I wanted to finish what I was saying about Kellen, because what I got from what he was saying, he said, my ways did not stop the hot emotions. They only made them worse. I lost my love from the earth because I made it hurt more. Gift is to heal the grid's harsh notes by loving the holes back to God. And just what I saw here was even Kellen, you know, even though he is even a holder of that frequency of love, that was part of his mission and part of the collective mission of autism, he still has to learn about love as well. And love is not just emotion. I'm talking like the energy of love, the frequency of love. It's an element like earth, water, fire, air. So really interesting.
And speaking of the gridding, because that's what he's talking about, the gridding, it's funny because I had no idea what gridding was. I know I don't know if a lot of people have seen my interview with Astro Boo Baby, but one of the things, way before I purchased the book, it was like in August of 2013 when he said he had given a reading to me, and he said, you know, Daniel is going to be working in the grids, and he's come here to download a DNA sequence into the grid, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, oh, that's nice, but what the French toast is a grid? So when I get this autism book, and I see that they're talking about gridding, I'm thinking, wow, okay, so this is starting to make sense. And what they say about gridding is we grid spaces inside buildings and energy holes in the ground. When we feel the energy vibrations, we can tell what is wrong with the energy grid. And I treat the grid to God's light to clear them. Sometimes when people think I'm being stubborn and not moving, that's not true. I'm busy gridding a place that is asking for my help. Now, I can relate to this because there are times, especially here in Sedona, Daniel does it a lot. There are times where I'm maybe in the grocery store, wherever the case may be, and I'm like, come on, Daniel, and he'll just plant his feet there, and he'll just stay there. And to someone looking on, they may go, and even me at times before I read this, I thought, you're being stubborn, you're being hard-headed, don't you hear me calling you? But now I realize, now I say, okay, you're working. And I've learned that when I'm patient and I allow him to do his work, he'll come. But you know what happened before when I didn't realize? He'd get ticked off at me and he'd have a tantrum. And I just think, why me? You know, because it's hard to get him to settle down. But now I understand and I let him work. You know, as long as he's not, a bad, like where he's in someone's way, but I let him work.
That's awesome. And you know what? I think that is something that somebody with small children could learn from as well. Because oftentimes, our children are in a store, as a good example, and they want something, and you're not getting it for them, or it's time for you to leave the store, and they're not ready. And what happens? There's a tantrum. Perhaps if we can just be patient and pause a little bit, and slow down. I think that's what the big message is here. And that is something maybe more important is going on. And maybe you're not connecting with your child, whatever it is. I think if you just pause, slow down, and realize that something is happening there. I mean, your child could be working on you, working on your relationship. Yeah, I'm glad that you talked about that because I know we're going to go over a little bit more today just because there's so much rich information. As I was reading this, I didn't realize how much of this was a lot of the nonverbals sharing their insight. So really deep and stuff that I had to go over again and again. But I really want to touch on the importance of family. This family dynamic that, like you had said before, this blessing that they come in. I don't remember what the words were. It was perfect. But I loved what she shared about that because that has been my experience with ever since I became a mom. And I say that, my child woke me up. That's when I had my awakening, my first awakening. As we're experiencing, we have more than one, really. And I mean, that whole section for me is pretty much highlighted. And I really loved how she talked about the vaccines. She says many blame things like shots for this high number. And I know we talked about that a little bit in one of our other shows, but that is something that is important to me. Our children are coming in more sensitive, and they're coming in showing us the ways that aren't working. And just with my own personal education and research, I vaccinated up to a certain point with my first son. And it wasn't until my very sensitive dog, who was a very large example of autism in my life for 11 years of her life. And I learned so much from her, but it took recognizing the toxicity that was happening there and the purpose that I was even doing it. And so I'm not going to say that vaccines specifically cause autism, although there was a study that was released that was hidden that it did show that it did cause. I think in African American males, the MMR vaccine was proven to be 340% more likely to cause autism. And I think that, you know, if you think of it this way, it makes sense. It doesn't make one way wrong or another, because there's many things that there's a big reason why autism is here, and it's a beautiful reason. But there's many other purposes that offset symptoms. And if you look at it as a medical model, if you look at it as a physical body, the way that they diagnose autism has to do with boxes checked on symptoms. So if I had the symptoms, for example, of Parkinson's, which is shaking and different things, then I would be diagnosed with Parkinson's. So it's really just a label, and something that, as we can see by Gail's beautiful example, it's something that we can use as a stepping stone. But it's an important subject, you know? And so I appreciated that she pointed that out, because when I read that in this book at the time when I first read it, it really helped me, because I was so open to understanding what this phenomenon of autism was. And I so love this higher spiritual view and understanding of it. And that's where we're going, people. Just keep that in mind. From this point forward, it's going to get way out there. And that's why I suggested open your heart, quiet your mind, and, you know, just allow yourself to absorb the information, and see what kind of magic changes in you from it. Because that happened for me big time. Did that happen for you too, Connie?
Yeah, oh yes. And, you know, like I said in my interview with Astra Blue Baby to the parents, he asked me, what would you say to the parents? Let go of a lot of your belief system. And it doesn't mean that you got to stop going to your church or stop being a Buddhist, or it just means to open your heart and mind up a little bit more. Don't be afraid. Okay, because a lot of us are afraid of change. That's change. Oh my gosh, I believed this all my life, so I don't want to change. No, you open up. There's no wrong way. Okay, you don't have to go follow this creed, follow that creed. Just open up. And with that being said, I'm being guided to read something Lyrica wrote in closing. She said, God needs us to be teachers and heart healers that we came here to be. God is smiling on the world as autism covers the planet. Why do y'all think that is?
That's beautiful. Is that in the chapter?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I don't have the page number, but that's I believe it's in the Autism Teachers chapter. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's so true. Here, this goes right along with it, with what you were just saying. On page 79, she says, mind asking for heart to take charge, get autism child. Heart medicine is autism child to raise. Lessons dear are written into contract of autism. Contract is to teach parents how to love in lonely way of not getting love back from their child. That's a big one. Wow. Parents who love their child as is get the lesson satisfied. Yeah, and see, that's kind of what I'm talking about love not being this emotion that we understand, right? It's bigger than that.
And don't you just feel like a little pat on the back when you read that section? Don't you just feel like a little pat, like good job, like a good job pat on the back? I mean, I did, like it's just beautifully written, and this chapter is so rich. I mean, I think this is one of my favorite chapters before Lyrica's section,
right?
Which is chapter 6. So it's a beautiful chapter, beautiful
words.
I agree. You could go. I mean, we could go on all day about just chapter 6.
I'm with you on that one. That's why I was like, maybe we should have done chapters separate just to make the show a little shorter. But you guys are just going to have to bear with us. And I apologize. I actually didn't put the question and answer, the Q&A up until about halfway through. So please, if any of you out there have anything you want to add, any questions you want to say, and you're watching this live, we welcome anything that you have to say. And also encourage you, we're going to have a little more conversation and perhaps a little more space coming up here. We've got some vacations and things to work around. So, and the energies, I think more importantly, because that's really guiding this process as well. That's why we don't have this set schedule of when everything's going to happen, is because we're really happening in that watery flow as Lyrica describes it. And it's so freeing to be there. I think that really alludes to what we're talking about here. It's like you felt good. You got that pat on the back because you found that place to love your child, regardless of his behaviors, regardless of what was going on. And that doesn't mean that we still don't have to deal with those daily behaviors, the outbursts, the things that happen. But if we can step out of them emotionally, I noticed that if I'm able to take a breath and let that emotion move through, there's this really cool fact, a neuroscience fact, that an emotion can only exist for 90 seconds on its own. And I've seen it last even shorter in my son, because we've done this process of emotional processing. What makes it live longer is the thought. So when we're sitting there saying, I feel sad, and we're acknowledging the emotion, I feel sad, but then we say, I feel sad because he did this to me and that, and then you start telling this story, then that sadness lives and lives and lives as long as you're telling that story. And what happened is when you just acknowledge the emotion and you feel it, it passes. And once that emotion is passed, you're back to that state of just being, peace. You're just peaceful and you're neutral, and you're able to see whatever lesson is in front of you that your child is co-creating with you. Because this is where they are connecting with you, or the child. It doesn't have to be yours. It could be someone you're working with. It could be another adult. You know, this reflective relationship thing that we have going on is super important. And there's lesson in everything, every interaction. So, but so special, that parent-child relationship, because they trigger us in ways that I never thought that I would experience. I don't know if you had that experience too, but there were things that I've done and said that I'm not proud of. But at the same time, I know my child loves me and is showing me every day how to love him or them, regardless of the beliefs and the conditioning that I think that they should stay within. You know, I'm still growing. I'm still experiencing it and learning how to be partners with my children, but also give them the healthy boundaries and the guidance that only an adult can give a child, so that they stay alive and, you know, don't run out into the street and all of those little things. But yeah, it's about loving them, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Amy. Yes, it is. It is. And that was beautifully stated. And yes, just yesterday, you know, I had a difficult time, and I said, you know what? It's okay. It's okay for me to be frustrated right now, you know. And Daniel agrees. It's okay. Feel that out, because if you hold it in, it gets worse. So feel it out, but keep on moving after you feel it out. Don't dwell on it. You know, it's okay. We are in the human body. It's okay. We're doing a great job.
We are. Everybody is. Everybody is. I would say that no matter how hard we are on ourselves, you know, get out of that parental guilt and allow yourself to feel. That's a really important thing I didn't know was going to come up. And that's been a huge lesson for me with my child, because he showed me that I was an empath, and I didn't know I was. And, you know, people that are empathic tend to pick up on other people's energy. You know, emotions is energy movement, E-motion. So emotions are what they are. And I noticed that whatever thought I pair with the energy can actually change what I'm feeling. So I can feel anxiety or I can feel excitement. It depends on what thought I pair with that. And, you know, it's just a growing learning process that I'm just really starting to understand better. But I think one of our humanity's biggest things is that we don't know how to process emotions. We don't allow ourselves to feel particular emotions. We judge them as good or bad, right or wrong. And really, I believe that it's really just let it flow. You know, that's part of our sensory system, or part of our ability to experience through our senses the world. And the connections we have with each other as well, because we share that with each other. And probably one of the reasons, my favorite quote in this section of the book, it's on page 80 at the top. She says, family trials are how they deal with our differences. They are given water in their souls to heal their areas of certainty. And that spoke to me profoundly, because I grew up around people that acted like they had to know everything. And not all, you know, but some of the role models that I had. And so when I became a parent, I remember the day I relaxed when I finally realized I didn't have to know everything. And one of those certainty things, that knowing everything, is that you don't share or show certain emotions, but what happens is they get stuck in our body. And I know there's a lot of scientific proof out there that links a lot of disease and illness to just stuck emotions. Can you imagine? That's why energy work is so profound, because, and what you're talking about with what these guys have been doing with the gridding, they're clearing that energy that's there, and they're acknowledging what's stuck and what's needing to have God's light added to it. I love how, I believe it was Leslie that said that I'm treating, like I looked at, like, not just treating it like a practitioner, but she's giving a treat to that part, you know, of the earth by giving it the light blessing. So really, really special.
Amy, also, I think it was Leslie that wrote that she didn't think that she had those types of gifts, and that when she found out, she was so excited, and that she loves to heal, to play her part in healing, you know. Hold on, I don't think that was a grid. I think that was just a natural healing gifts that the autistics have, that, you know, that she was referring to. You know, that she has this healing gifts that she likes to work with, you know, and it's not an ego thing like, oh, I healed you. It's everything comes from God. This is, you know, this is what I'm here to do. And I thought that was a beautiful thing.
That's perfect. Well, I think we have about gone enough over time. There's a lot in this chapter. I'll probably go back and read it again, because I love the message through it. The alignment with self, you know, the freedom that exists from that. And it's just beautiful to me, because it talks, it's like they take us on this journey through, even, you know, they were saying kind of towards the end of chapter 6, I believe it was Lyrica was saying how they had to start low. We have terrible battles to break out of this world. The world is so weary for us. We have to start in a low place to know of God's presence. We had light free the whole time, but we not know it. We thought darkness was ours in us. The last thing we thought was there was light big. We were experiencing the darkness of society more than our darkness. Sure, we have our own asking places that need healing. Not different from others in that way, but lasting darkness, not of our own soul. And then later on, towards the end of the chapter, and I just want to say, like, this is what we're going through. We're experiencing that darkness as well. That's what we're letting go of. That's what we're having to kind of watch it pass through our awareness so it can release. So I encourage you not to argue with it or wonder why it's there, because it's coming up. And if we can just let it go, trust me, it's not easy. We ask why it's there. We ask all these questions and we re-engage with that energy. But if we can see that we're in a really pivotal place right now where we have an ability to release a lot of stuff, beliefs, densities, conditioning, we can bring ourselves to this better place. And so on 84, she says, we have such a high soul vibration. We have trouble living in a body in this dimension. Holds on our bodies have a purpose. They are keys to the higher plan. Pals on higher places tell me this. plan getting ready to bring our bodies up to our fuller light body place. I am not soul ready to live in my body yet. I'm getting my higher self activated to go into my body home, and my body home is being pulled up into a higher frequency dimension. So I just want to say, you know, we are all doing that. We all have that ability to do that. And so we just need to keep listening and opening our hearts and tapping into that part of ourselves that's inside of us and trusting that, learning how to trust that, because it is a process, isn't it, Connie?
Yes, it's, you know, continuing to learn and grow. It is a process, yes.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much, Connie, for being here. And thank you, Gayle and Lyrica, for touching in with us and treating us to just your energy this morning. That was beautiful. So appreciate you both and for writing this book. So next week, Connie, we didn't talk about this. We can do it right now. Are we going to do next week, or are we not sure yet?
I'm not sure yet. I got to check something out.
Okay, great. So we will stay tuned. We're either going to do next week, and if not that, it'll be 2 weeks, roughly 2 weeks from today. I think we talked about doing the, I believe it was the 21st of July. And that might be more like it because, you know, with everything that's going on energetically, I can say that, you know, we're all facing some challenges right now, and time to integrate, time to take all of this information and get it all assimilated, and that space that we talk about often. So I encourage all of you, anybody who's watching and hasn't signed up for the book club email, all you will get is, you know, emails that have recordings and some of the insights and information and links to get into the Autism Experience Facebook group, where I am seeing we're going to be having some more conversation in between the broadcasts that really just kind of bring out everyone's stories. And I encourage you to share your personal stories. And don't feel like you have to give super personal information. If you want to keep it vague and on a specific subject matter, that's great too, because your stories help others and it creates a conversation that's engaging. And as we saw with Milena sharing about her nephew, and Connie had gotten a message from Andre before, that was a really incredible unfolding. And I just have a feeling that there's going to be a lot more of that sort of magic happening. So thank you all for being with us today. Be sure to comment and question and subscribe. And we all love you. So thank you. Namaste. Bye.
Bye, everyone.